So on Friday, the House passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which greenlighted about $900 billion in military spending for the coming fiscal year. On the Senate side, they popped on another $25 billion to that. So we'll get the particulars on what all that spend means. But one thing that's interesting about what's happening and what's been reported, you have Christy Houlihan in the House. She's a Democrat socialist from Pennsylvania and Air Force veteran. She wants women to be auto-enrolled in the Selective Service same way that men 18 to 26 would be under the National Defense Authorization Act, the version passed in the House.
Yeah, feminists have been begging for this for years.
And there's also a report that the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee intends to require women to register for the Selective Service as part of their version of said defense spending legislation. In the name of equity, I know that's something that General Lloyd Austin and the senior leadership of the armed services these days likes to throw around that word. They like to throw around like everybody else on their side of the philosophical divide. Yeah, how about putting women on the front lines? Yeah, let me know how it goes, ladies. Right?
Oh, it's funny because we were with my niece yesterday, and she's 24, and we're like, "Oh, did you hear that you're gonna have to sign up for Selective Service?" She's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "It's a possibility. You're in that age group."
Sex in the City on the front lines.
Hey.
Let's heads up, China, Russia. We got a whole new armed services coming at you, and I wouldn't underestimate them. You know, that segment that constitutes the audience of The View, it can be,
Pretty nasty.
quite aggressive.
Yeah.
The order will be don't see until you see the pink of their pea hats.
Right. A nice stiletto in the eye, huh? Didn't see that one coming, did you?
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Now, Stephen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's always my pleasure to be on the show. Thank you for having me.
Requiring women to register for a Selective Service, register for the draft as part of the National Defense Authorization Act. Good idea?
Registering for the draft, given that all the branches of the military are now open to women, I guess it kind of makes some sort of sense, but it seems like an awful lot of virtue signaling going on, because I remember when we started including women more broadly in the military back when we got ready to deploy for the first Gulf War. And there was a famous picture, I don't know if you guys remember it, of this little tiny petite gal, wire rim glasses, her helmet on her head, her K-pop, the helmets we wear now, looked like a big turtle on top of her because it was probably not the right size because they weren't making those sizes yet. And she was saying goodbye to her 7-week-old child because you only get 6 weeks of maternity leave in the military, and it was after the 6 weeks by a week, and she was deploying with her unit, leaving that 7-week-old child with her husband. And boy, there was a furor. People got upset. How could we do this? This is terrible. Well, it's because your legislators passed a law that said women are equal in the military and they can do all this stuff. So you can't have 2 sets of rules. Okay, there's consequences when you have that much equity, folks. So moms, dads, to be honest with you, if they cause them all to register, you will see a connected drop in female enlistments in the military, because parents will go, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want our daughters doing this. And I think it's going to cause more problems than it'll solve. And it's interesting, people who like these ideas are people who are never going to come in the military themselves.
Do you think there's a possibility, and I tweeted this out, but I am crazy. I'm going to admit it. I think they're doing this in case a man starts to identify as a woman to avoid selective service registration?
No, I think it's more tied to the feminism aspect of it. That legislator you referred to, she is a radical, you know, left leaning Democrat. She thinks, you know, everybody's the same. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You could switch gears and join whatever team you want. We don't necessarily agree with that, do we? And so, you know, this idea that there might actually be differences between men and women,
No.
particularly with regard, you know, that's
No.
Yes, there are
foreign
severe
stuff.
differences
No diff-
between men and women.
No differences. No.
You want to put the best out there, and sometimes the best
Eh.
out there are men. Not sometimes.
No.
It is.
No.
what it
No.
is.
No.
I'm glad to see you've finally gotten woke, Dan.
No,
Better
exactly. No, look, I mean, yeah, it's the old be careful what you wish for. You may get it. So, I mean, the problem, of course, is, I mean, I'd be interested in your perspective on this. This is not a new topic, but I guess we have to revisit it. What you think having a more equally distributed armed services across the gender, of course, you know, sexual divisions, what that would mean for sort of unit cohesion and efficacy, if say the front lines, rather than being 100% men, were 50-50 men and women. How you think that would go?
Well, as far as unit cohesion, I guess it kind of depends on how you define that. They might be very cohesive, which wouldn't necessarily help your readiness.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, that would be a problem. I'm sorry, but you know, there are females, and I have worked with them. I have respect for them that could do anything I could do. They are not the majority. And in the same way, if a guy can't meet the standards in that particular military occupational specialty, the way we divide up the military of who does what, they get transferred to another MOS.
Yep.
They don't stay there. If you can't do the infantry stuff, you can't stay in the infantry. You go somewhere else because you put everybody else at risk if you can't do your job. I'm concerned that as we continue to bring, to try and get this mythical goal which is just what you described, the military should reflect the exact composition of our society. I'm sorry, that would not make us a more ready and prepared military. It wouldn't. No offense, but 50% of the women out there are not capable of doing all of the tasks in those MOSs. If a woman can do it, put her in there.
Well,
and then it becomes a command responsibility,
yeah.
you know, to maintain the discipline. It's harder, don't get me wrong, but, you know, it's hard to argue that if a woman can do all of the physical things that I can do, why can't she be in there? But the problem is that's not the case. They changed the standards, and that is going to lower our readiness, and that's dangerous for the safety of the United States of America.
I'm opposed to the draft sort of categorically. I'm in the Milton Friedman camp and the famous exchange he had with General Westmoreland, you'll recall. But I almost want to see the draft reinstituted, just to see what sort of desertion rates we'd see between the two sexes. I think that would be interesting.
Go to jail for 10 years if you get caught.
It'd be very interesting. But I digress. I'm an anachronism, I know. The issue of Ukraine. I don't know if you saw over the weekend, but Trump was in Detroit at a rally essentially, and Steve Bannon was there. And Steve Bannon, to the young throngs of Trump supporters that were there, said in no uncertain terms, Trump gets back in the White House and there won't be one more red cent sent to Ukraine. How do you react to that?
Well, I don't have any problem with that if then President Trump can come up with a way to get Vladimir Putin out of Ukraine. which I think he might have a better chance of doing that than Joe Biden, who right now I don't think there is any chance of Biden doing what might need to be done to keep Vladimir Putin's appetite, from growing and looking elsewhere. But, again, fine. I got to see what President Trump's plan is to solve the problem, because right now, Russia being in Ukraine, in my mind, is a national security problem. So we have to wait and see what he's going to come up with.
What about speaking of Russia? What about Russia's latest incursions into the Western Hemisphere? That sub off the coast of Cuba. Do we, whatever Russia and China may be doing in concert with one another to support similarly disposed communist dictators in places like Venezuela? Are we, paying attention to what's happening in our backyard?
I believe we are paying attention. I know the military and intel communities are clearly paying attention to it. But right now, we're not going to put a blockade on Cuba like Kennedy did during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we're not. Cuba is an ally of Russia. They're friends. It's legal for them to do visits. The Monroe Doctrine no longer applies the way it did back during the days when we had sails on our ships. So we're not going to shoot at somebody who comes into the Western Hemisphere. So Russia does stuff like this pretty regularly, frankly. But we watch them, we shadow them, we're probably gathering intel from them. I'm not saying it's not significant. It is. We don't like them to be so bold and open about it, but there's not one heck of a lot we can do about it short of shooting at them, and I don't think we want to do that. And I don't think Joe Biden has the intestinal fortitude to do it, and I'm not sure it's the right thing to do. So we got to keep watching them, stay vigilant, and make sure that they don't get to doing anything that's more dangerous than just their presence.
Speaking of the much vaunted intel community, that Hunter Biden conviction last week doesn't reflect terribly well on those 51 who signed all the earmarks of a Russian information campaign. That's not an authentic Hunter Biden laptop deal. A few years back, just in advance of the 2020 election. And, there's a lot of talk coming from Trump and his surrogates that heads will roll in the administrative state and the deep state. That means some of their heads, and to the extent they're not there anymore, their access to, which is important to some of the jobs they have subsequent, like General Hayden over at NewsGuard doing censorship work for the state. So I wonder what you hear from inside those hallowed halls about how much panic there is among the sort of permanent administrative intel community types about their positions, their access, or both.
Well, I think if you talk to them publicly, they would probably say, "Oh, there's not going to be any problems. We didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, of course.
There's nothing they could really do to us." I think, look, I was part of the intel community. Some of the people that signed that list, a lot of them I had absolutely no respect for, like Mr. Brennan, before they did that. Some of them I had worked with, I did have some respect for, but when they signed that, it was so blatantly untrue and so blatantly politically motivated to support Biden versus Trump that I was appalled. And at this point, I think now that we have the evidence in court, in Congress, that what was purported to be the truth, validated by the so-called experts, turned out to be a complete fabrication, a politically motivated lie. Mike Morell has admitted he was one of the people who came up with the idea. Somebody should pay a price for that. The American people were hoodwinked. Mm-hmm. There was collusion between these people, both in Intel and recently out of Intel, with the mainstream press. to perpetrate this lie on the American people at a critical time in the election. And I think someone, preferably a whole bunch of people, maybe like 50 or 60 of them, ought to pay a price for that. If they're still in government, they should lose those government jobs. If they're out of government, their clearances should be revoked because they no longer show the trust that those clearances are supposed to attest to.
Yeah, but do you think they'll do it again though? Another issue comes up.
I'm sure they will try. I have no doubt, particularly as the Dems get more and more desperate about this. That's very likely to happen. That's why I think that should be a point that is hammered by the Trump camp over and over again. That there's good evidence, polling evidence, that a lot of people towards the center would have changed their vote if that story had been shown to be accurate as we now know it was when it first came out. They were persuaded not to switch their votes because of the lie of that letter labeling it clearly Russian disinformation, or as was put out. Well, we didn't say it wasn't Russian information. We just said it had all
the earmarks
of Russian
right.
disinformation.
Yeah, right.
And I'm sorry, that's a difference, or without a distinction.
Right. No, but
they lied.
You're right, and they're in for a penny. They're in for a pound now, and they know it. So, yeah, look for another October surprise of some sort from that quarter. Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen Bucci, thank you as always.
It's my pleasure, and we look forward to talking.
Okay, thank you so much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Our communities deserve to have their tax dollars spent efficiently. All over Chicagoland, there is an increased need for vital projects like wetland improvements, enhancing water quality, or stormwater mitigation to protect